Welcome to the Digible Dudes podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reed.
Reed, we already bantered a minute offline just now. What do you have to banter about?
Well, I might start griping about our snack situation, which is probably the last thing you thought I was going to say. And I love Shannon to death, but she shouldn't have taken that over.
It's a thankless job.
It is such a thankless job.
I don't know if Ryan gave her the review ahead of time of like, you don't want snacks.
She mentioned that she could help out, and about a hot second, Ryan was like, "It's yours, take it." And now I'm looking at this fruity and nut trail mix, and I can't stand it. But it's like the third one I've had in the last week.
This is a really good segue into a separate rant that you started over lunch. You went to Chop House, which is a restaurant we like down the street, and you were complaining about the size of your burger.
Yeah.
So I think there's some learnings there for the audience, if you would.
There is. Everybody pay close attention, and hopefully it's not happening to you at your local sandwich or burger shop. But and I love Chop Shop, but I noticed the last couple times I've been there that either my burger or my chicken sandwich looked a little bit smaller. Mm-hmm. And so I was telling David that Washington Post had an article during Valentine's Day, and I haven't looked it up yet, but the term that they're using has to do with like how businesses are managing inflation, and the CPG industry in particular is doing this, where they are putting less product in their cereal, in their chip bags and whatnot. And so they showed this Russell Stover's box, and when they pulled out all the packaging, it looked pathetic. There was like some chocolates down at the bottom, of the heart, and all the rest was just empty space. And so it felt like that is what's going on, because Lurch noticed it too. He went to lunch with us, and he said, "Yeah, my chicken sandwich looked like a nugget, like put on a piece of bread, basically." And that's how they're handling it. So it's like they, instead of increasing rates, which you talked about this with our neighbors down the street at Breakfast Queen, but are they doing any kind of variable pricing? So if their product goes up as a result of inflation, so does the price on the menu, right? But not many restaurants are doing that. And instead of all these big packaging companies, CPG, they're like, we'll keep the price relatively the same. We're just going to put in less product and see if you notice. Mm-hmm. It's so unethical. Like, to me, that is where government should step in and be like, this isn't okay.
Chop Shop, you can't reduce the size of your hamburger.
Well, that's Chop Shop. But I'm just saying, like, a cereal box, really?
Yeah.
Like, is it actually a quarter less full than it was before?
Well,
who would notice?
They have to print the network or the net weight or whatever on the box. So if they change it, but what you're saying is like, if you've gotten accustomed to something, you no longer check the net weight. And then all of a sudden you're like, what happened?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
You would, and it's subtle, but at scale, think about it. If you're talking about Fruit Loops across the United States.
Do you know the story of the McDonald's cheese slice?
Yeah. Some guy, made his name by removing.
Yeah, so I just looked it up so I could get this correct, and we didn't. I was telling Erica we probably at the end of the episode need a fact check. There's this other podcast I listen to where they do fact check at the end. They're like, a producer says, "Reed said this, and he was wrong," or whatever.
I'm squashing that right now. Yeah. I don't want to fact check on me.
You know what? We've already been fact checked. Just trust us. So yeah, I looked it up. So in 2008, McDonald's removed the second cheese slice from the McDouble burger, and they saved $278 million a year by removing one of the two slices.
Good God.
And that goes to show, like, as you're saying, at scale, you make a small change. It has a massive impact to the bottom line. Now, did anybody stop buying McDoubles because there was a second slice gone? I don't know. But probably not the same impact. The $278 million was worth it. It's kind of like how in SaaS pricing, they say always raise your prices because you'll never turn as many people as you, as the profit that you increase. So there's something there, but it's more about, I guess your point here is like, how do you handle the messaging of that? Mm-hmm. Right? Like if you were, I could already see like Patagonia or something like who's, more willing to like put up an ad that says, "Don't buy this jacket." I could see them doing something and making marketing out of it. But if you're McDonald's or whatever, General Mills, you get blasted because I guess you haven't built a brand that is allowed those things.
Right. Which takes me back to the consumer brand loyalty. What was our man's name? We just had him on a few weeks ago.
Oh, yeah. Shoot, I can even picture him right here, but he had been from Amenify and then
Well, anyways, he talked about that, and I think that's where it kicks in, right? Is some brands are, I guess, have that level of loyalty and buy-in that they can get away with that, and some don't. And General Mills is probably a good example of one that doesn't. And in a way, it's almost like what we see in properties. You have like the parent brand and Phil, yeah. But anyways, yeah, you get what I'm saying. I think what also is interesting about the McDonald's, and I'm guessing it doesn't capture this, but you said, does anybody notice that extra piece of cheese is gone? For the person that does, are they actually willing to pay for now extra cheese?
Yeah.
So you just saved $278 million.
Yeah.
And now you added another $50 million in people buying extra cheese.
Yeah,
so
you upsold them on cheese.
Yeah, exactly. Now you're, $330 million.
Yeah, I will say this, going back to, as you said, brand loyalty. When we read Seven Powers and we talked about brand power, I think it's hard to do in the early going when you're starting a company, like deciding like this is our voice, because tends to be more survival. But if you can be someone. It just happened that Patagonia wanted to be themselves from the beginning, so they didn't have to go through a transition. But at some point, I think it's definitely a strategic decision to say, like, does General Mills for Frosted Flakes or whatever, like, start changing to where they can have a Patagonia, slant to it, for example. So for us, I personally wouldn't want to be, I guess, like at the top of a company it's got to be so like communications oriented, where it's like you got to get sign off from 15 different people, and we can't be sort of snarky or whatever, just because that's just not where I would want to work. Some people want to like have the stalwart brand or something, but you could see how Tiffany's like that wouldn't go over, right? As Hamilton talks about for their power, but then Patagonia makes hay out of something like it. So.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah, super interesting. All right. Well, this episode, we're talking to Chelsea for her second podcast. She's coming back to talk about what she's discovered.
Cheeseburgers.
Yeah, cheeseburgers. Yeah, what she's discovered with websites and what Digible websites are going to look like now that we've launched them, and what you can expect from them overall. You can always check the show notes. There's timestamps on different parts of the conversation. I'd say the first 2/3 of the conversation are about like her discovery with client interviews and such. And the last third of the conversation is more about Digible websites and what we're doing and why. So it's a long one. Just Reed and I were so locked in, we went super long. But check those timestamps if you need to skip around the particular topics.
Yep. I thought it was a great one. Chelsea, has picked up so much in what feels like an eternity, but it hasn't been. It's, you blink and I can see her first day. So really impressed with how much she's picked up from the industry, and kudos to you, obviously, in helping mentor her and get her where she's at. So now it's game time, as they say. We're really ready to go heavy at the market with our websites, and I think we got a great product. So glad to have her back on and talking us through it.
There is an Easter egg buried in this episode, so if you find it, you're welcome to take advantage of it. But I'll just leave you hanging there. All right, hope you enjoy. See you later. Okay, we're here with Chelsea. Chelsea, introduce yourself.
For the second time.
Yes, for podcast number 2. I am Chelsea Schonhaut. I am Digible's web product manager, and we just launched our website department offering. So we're here today to dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah.
And tell me if I got this wrong, but Schonhaut means beautiful skin.
Yes.
Right.
Sure.
That was from the first episode, I think, right?
Yeah.
With her?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like it. It could be a skin brand, actually. Like Schonhaut.
Yeah, that sounds like a perfume to me, but
well, that's part of the way I said it. Yeah. Felt like a Calvin Klein, mock commercial.
Yeah. Well, now I have to ask though, Reed, do you judge like celebrities once they go and do like a fragrance commercial?
No, not a whole lot. I don't pay attention to that stuff.
I don't pay too much attention, but whenever I see like, this is a little
meaning
bit different,
like you're thinking like sellout type stuff.
I'm thinking like, is their career in the crapper? Like meaning like when you see Matthew McConaughey doing like Lincoln commercials, I'm like, does this guy need to do Lincoln commercials?
Yeah.
And I feel that way sometimes with brands. Like I saw like Jake Gyllenhaal for Christmas did a cologne commercial or something. I'm like, I don't think you need to do that, man. And now I don't know what I think about it.
Yeah, I don't think that's a good sign for Jake Gyllenhaal.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
There used to be a stigma with movie stars doing cameos even on TV shows.
That's
I think
right.
Friends kind of broke that ceiling a little bit because, it was such a popular show and probably a lot of celebrities themselves were watching it. So you'd see, whoever, like De Niro or something.
Brad Pitt came on.
Yeah, Brad Pitt was one
yeah.
of the bigger ones. Of course, he was dating one of the stars at the time. So
yeah, but it definitely made it like more okay than where it used to be. Like
now, I don't think people think twice.
Yeah,
I don't know if we're going to get there with commercials.
Yeah. And perfume for some reason, and I think it's because of the way they're shot. They're all shot with this like dark filter.
Yeah, or
whatever.
sepia or black gray. Yeah, grayscale.
Yeah. Well, anyways, Jake, I'll give you a movie role. Just come talk to me. All right. So Chelsea joined us.
Maybe we should have him do a website commercial.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, let's tie it together. Yeah, people might be like, "What's up with Digible website?"
Got a $2,500 budget. You in?
Yeah. Well, you joined us maybe 9 months or so ago, and then you came on quickly after to just talk about like your perceptions of like what this role would be, what you were going to discover. And so we thought it'd be fun now that you're so far in and we've officially launched Digible websites now, just for you to say, hey, here's what I discovered through my client interviews and what you learned and maybe some of the assumptions that we were wrong about. And if you have any now new hot takes. So how do you want to start, Chelsea? You want to tell us like what you've discovered or what you've done, or where do you want to go?
Sure. I guess it makes sense for us to kind of start off with some of the items that we discovered, because that really led to what we've ended up with in terms of what we're offering with this new service. So I guess to kind of set things up from the beginning, we conducted a number of, I think, up to about 30 different client experience interviews where we gathered information on competitor web vendors, basically what our clients' experience has been like working with them. And then we also did an external survey that we sent out to our entire client base and got some responses from that. And so a lot of our findings are based off of those conversations in that survey specifically. So we've really identified a couple key areas where there are gaps in the industry that we're looking to fill. And so one of those is the client experience. So client being the property management company, they've experienced a lot in terms of it's difficult to manage websites. They have a million different logins and admin URLs to keep track of. They don't always have access to edit things that they want to edit on their websites. If they do have access, they might be blocked by usability. So whether those edits can only be made by a developer or if it's just complicated, convoluted. Websites have been notoriously slow to launch. So there's a really long kind of process to get the website up and running, in addition to some kind of snags in the process, just as a client going through the experience of being onboarded, submitting content, reviewing progress on a website. There's just a whole bunch of different kinks to kind of work out to make that move smoother. So I would say that's one of the biggest areas that we're looking to kind of fill. David, do you have anything to add to that one in terms of experience issues?
Less on that side. I mean, I think a lot of people know that like websites take forever to build in this industry, and the people aren't super excited about their capabilities. So then you'll have basically I'll say state of the industry is you have the free quote versions of websites that maybe come with their CRM, but that means now you got to use their stack. But if you don't like the templates or whatever that they have with it, or you don't like the website design, you're kind of SOL. And so then you might use someone more like a Jonah that's like a step up, where it's not custom, but it feels fancier, can do more things, but it's still pretty locked down and can still take 6 weeks to launch a website. And then you have like the custom builds that may take anywhere from like 2 months to 6 months to get done, and they may be like $15,000 to $30,000 in cost. So they're sort of cost prohibitive. And then as you point out, the management of them is also very aggravating, causes a lot of frustration. If we back up, instead of talking all negative, what was some positives? Like, what do people like about websites in the industry?
Can I stay on the negative train for
sure.
1 minute longer? How much of the issue on time to launch or build is client driven versus other vendors and potentially ourselves, Digible? Because I feel like we've had some challenges there ourselves, and it was more that the client couldn't get comfortable with the way it looked, it felt, et cetera. And that obviously could slow things down to a complete halt. So I'm just curious from your perspectives, being that you've done a lot of these interviews, do you think it's fair to say that this is a vendor problem when it comes to time to launch, or is this more of a owner/client problem?
Well, I think we heard about different scenarios, and so in some of those cases, I would say it was just a general slowness on the web vendor, but also there were a lot of issues with web vendors communicating with property management companies who are then also communicating with platforms. So let's, a rent cafe, basically, or, any property management system, basically having to be integrated with a website may cause delays as well. And so a lot of times it's kind of like, well, the client won't allow direct communication with the web vendor and the API support team. And so then we have the additional delay of like everybody's playing telephone, and an issue that's submitted on a Monday might not get even responded to until like a Wednesday. And so there can be a really big delay there to get integrations up on a website. And we'll touch on this later with some of the areas that we were surprised by. But I would say that's the biggest, one of the biggest items that we heard personal stories about. In addition to then what David was saying also, and what you had mentioned briefly with getting the look and feel of the website down right with more restrictive templates that don't allow flexibility. There can be a lot of frustration on the client's end of getting their brand reflected accurately with, a run-of-the-mill template. So I think that also leads to delays all around in terms of the client wants something different, like you were mentioning. And then there's also either custom work or the work is impossible, and then figuring out how to move forward can also create some delays there.
Yeah, I would say that it's definitely on both. One, like clients can be a challenge to wrangle, but the vendors have, in many ways, I think, built that into their process. So a lot of times I think they are making the assumption, the client's not going to be able to give me photos for 3 weeks. And so it's like, then they're not ready to receive photos for basically like 3 weeks, which then pushes it out. So I think part of it is definitely, we've seen this with paid. I'll just use paid search, for example. When we entered the industry and we're like, well, we'll launch in anywhere from 3 days to max 5 days. And people were blown away. Like, I thought it was a 30-day launch window. That's what our other vendors do. And it's like, no, we just have to how can we remove as much of the onus on the customer to get us the stuff? So it's possible to hit 3 days if we do the market research and we don't have to ask them about it. Then they can come in and give us tweaks to it, but we've already been able to launch and they didn't have to wait a whole month. I view it the same with websites. There's a lot we could do if they just pass us the brand kit with basically getting it to work versus instead saying, hey, client, show us which of these 40 templates you like. Okay, cool. Oh, sorry, you like this template, but your brand is curvy instead of angular. That template doesn't allow for curvy. It's angular. It's like that's kind of like where they're stuck these days. So, and then on top of that, it's definitely like customer management. But a lot of times I think, again, the vendors are asking for things that aren't necessary, or they're asking for things way too late in the process. And we've I mean, you and I just went through this last week with another customer where expectations weren't set. And I think being able to show people, as I'm using Adam Walters, the guy that started employee number 1 with us, his mug today, but he talks about the Domino pizza tracker. It's like having a Domino pizza tracker that's like, here's where we're at, client, and this is where we expect you to be, would make a huge difference to just show who's the onus on for this to be delayed, and just making those roles clear.
Yeah. This would be the time also to insert perfect's the enemy of good. Can you get a client on board with that concept? And not that you want to, I always say you can't make a first impression twice, or somebody else said that, and I agree with that. But, it's like that's 30 days of prospects that you're missing out by waiting that long to launch. And so that's real money versus doing in 3 to 5 days. Can't you get over some of the lines not looking the way you want them, so that you don't waste those opportunities?
And Chelsea and I have talked a lot about that. I would say we haven't completely solved for it yet. We'll know, we have to just run more experiments as we launch more websites. But she's been held up on some projects before because the client wants this or that perfect. But once it goes live, some of our websites are seeing double the amount of leads, so it's like, to your point, wouldn't you rather capture the leads and we'll figure it out afterwards because you just
Exactly.
missed out? So I think as we have more data, we will get that word tracking down better, and we can also then show the case studies to be like, come on, client, just launch. Like,
Yeah.
what you're going to forget about these 3 weeks that it's live, later, but let's get it up.
Yep.
So
Cool. All right. Shifting towards positive energy.
yeah,
Let us know, Chelsea.
I want to give some credit, right? Like about like what were some of the good things?
Yeah, no, for sure. There were definitely a number of positives. I think one of the ones that we did hear definitely mixed reactions, but there were a lot of positive and a lot of negative. That what I was hitting on earlier is the client experience. So there were some support teams that have responsiveness of, within a few hours, and there are some that it takes a few days. And obviously clients really appreciate the quick, timely responses. And so that's one of the items that we've tried to prioritize as we're still continuing to scale. How are we going to be able to respond to clients as quickly as possible, especially at the beginning when we're, starting to gain traction and hopefully getting a number of contact requests on a daily basis. So we have a system figured out for that, as well as long-term kind of maintenance requests. So after the project has been launched, what do then requests look like moving forward post-launch? How does the client submit those? Again, how do we make sure they're handled in a timely fashion? So definitely one of the areas that we made sure to focus on in terms of coming up with a solution that would work for everybody. And some of the positive information that we've received from our clients.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I'll name, but it was not surprising to me because Jonah came out as like a gold star here, where their team was responding like within the day and were super courteous and also, frankly, solving issues before the client was asking for an issue to be solved. They just came out as just like amazing. So Scott, your team is killing it. The customers are super happy with that. On the contrast, we have like the Yardies and RealPage integration teams are just slow. They don't really speak the client lingo, the marketer lingo. So getting things hooked up can be really challenging. And so, the clients were like, man, it would be great if like you could just talk directly to the integrations team and I don't have to try to translate for you. So just 2 examples there.
Mm-hmm, yeah. And for clients that are comfortable with that, we have a client right now that said, go ahead, reach out to them directly, just CC me. And that's, exponentially faster of a process than it is for, again, like we were talking about earlier, just kind of playing telephone, especially when there's different kind of strengths in those communication skills. It can be a challenge. So
fair to say that client support for websites right now in the industry pretty much is 100% a ticketed system. Not meaning, I'm just saying it starts that way. Is that correct?
I would say that's fair. And from the people that we heard from that didn't have ticketing systems, it's obviously much worse of a client experience. If they just have to send an email and trust that someone's going to handle it, that's a concern.
Yeah, totally. Well, follow up to that is, do we anticipate chatbots similar to what we're seeing like with the industry and leasing, where there's all these AI leasing agents, that we're going to start seeing more, service bots intercepting a lot of those, like, I'll say basic questions that come up with websites? Or do you think that would be a mistake, a problem, versus a ticketing system, then somebody reaches out and that's how the whole process works in handling like issues?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. That's not something that we've really explored too much, but it would be worth bringing up in the future as we're kind of doing discovery on what is our final user interface going to look like, not final, but, later down the line, how would we want to improve upon the system? Because I know, like, for example, Flywheel, they're hosting a WordPress hosting platform owned by WP Engine. They have a ticketed system that's connected to their chatbot. So you can chat with the chatbot, get some questions answered. If it needs to be elevated to a ticket, you don't have to then go do that yourself. You can just kind of say, yes, I want this to be a ticket, and they send it for you. So there's always options like that too, to kind of simplify things. Like, let's see if this AI can get you an answer to your question.
Exactly.
Now. Okay, it can't. Well, we'll take this to the next level.
Exactly. To me, that's the best experience. I think it's kind of polarizing with chatbots, don't you? Too many people probably still think like when they call up Verizon or Comcast or use that chatbot.
Yeah.
But if there's one, and especially with the amount of those frequently asked questions,
Mm-hmm.
you should be able to get in front of a good amount of that. And I'd rather do that than have to put in a ticket and then wait for that person to get back with me and go through the process.
I mean, it's definitely worth a test because I was just imagining um, what I think people don't, they want to feel like they're going to get an answer right away. So if to your point, they go to a chat bot and they think they're going to get their answer right away, fine. And then if a human jumps in, great. But I think many customers in this industry just expect they want to be able to fire off an email to a human. They don't want to think they're going to get into a robot. So I actually this would be a great question for Nicole running client experience, but Reed, you and I have been talking to a lot of people about executive assistants, and we were told they should own our email. And then we're told like the way that they should manage our email is that someone emails Reed, but the executive assistant might jump in first and say, hey, I just got to this before Reed. I'm his executive assistant. He's available Tuesday. I've gone ahead and booked it. Like that's a much better experience because I think I'm hitting Reed and then I get intercepted by, I'll just say the EA, but you could imagine getting intercepted by the bot now with like, here's the answer or whatever. So, but there's definitely the expectation because I had to call the bank or something this weekend, and I was like, I went on hold, and I almost like didn't even want to listen to whatever the options were because I just assume it's going to be a terrible experience of like what number. It's like 00, meaning I want operator, right? So, yeah, it's going to take a long time. We've talked about that before to turn the impression of bots around to a good experience.
Right. They still have a pretty bad reputation. Yeah. Well, two big buckets I don't think I heard you speak to, but maybe you were going to get to here in a second as far as your discoveries, good or bad, is one, how's the industry feeling about integrations? And then on the creative side, since we touched on that, some of the challenges with the client, but more so like, did the people that you interview feel like websites look good, feel good in multifamily, or are they saying, no, we haven't made much progress. These still look like cookie cutter templates and we hate the creative or the design, So if you'll speak to both of those, like what did you hear about integrations and what did you hear about the kind of look and feel design of multifamily websites?
Yeah, I would say the look, feel, design, there were definitely there's a lot of mixed feedback there. And that's kind of to be expected because people have different opinions on design in general. Some people are more design oriented. Some people don't care as long as something functions and works, then, who cares what it looks like? So there's definitely a pretty mixed bag there. There were some people who did say, I always know a so-and-so website is a so-and-so website because I know their templates so well. And then there are some people that say, I don't care if you know what template it is. It's working. The website is getting conversions. It's fine. So I'd say across the board there was a pretty big mix, but also, as we were mentioning earlier, the biggest frustration is definitely when clients don't feel if they've invested a decent amount of money in branding their property, they want to see that brand reflected. And so the limitations of some vendors' templates don't allow for simple things like, oh, can you switch these two sections? I want this one first instead of this one, or I want a background image in the hero area instead of a background color. There are a number of different scenarios where it sounds like a very simple edit that would take, just a few seconds to do from a developer perspective or a web designer perspective, but the clients are either told no, or that would be an astronomical kind of additional fee, something like $1,000 just to switch the placement of two sections. So I would say, but there were definitely some people who did mention what you were saying about cookie cutter website templates. And of course, there are always expansions in that realm of design. So, Rent Cafe came out with Rent Caffeine to try and kind of handle that and have some more modern aesthetics. And I think some of those templates are definitely more successful, but depending upon, the marketing manager, the property manager, and basically all of the different people who are involved, whether they would be willing to pay more money for something like that is questionable. So if it's just kind of there and it isn't additional cost, we've found that it would definitely be a big benefit. So that's one of the things that we made sure to build into our product is lots of flexibility. You don't need to pay extra money. If you want something to get up really quickly, we have templates. If you want to take a little bit more time and finagle things, then we have that option as well. It's no extra cost. So that's kind of our solution to one of those issues. Integrations, let's see here. So definitely a hot button topic, and definitely we were able to kind of commiserate with a lot of people about the complications and just how how convoluted it is to get these integrations on websites sometimes. I think I might be jumping the gun here a little bit, but one of the areas that we were kind of surprised by is the fact that so many websites will go live without their integrations fully fleshed out. This was one of the things that I was under the assumption it was a necessity. We need to have this 100% figured out before we would launch a website. There are some people who just want a website up. They don't really care if the schedule a tour integration isn't fully ironed out yet, if there are still things being figured out with the API support team, the property management company. Let's just get it up and we'll work on this over the course of the next few weeks or so and get it to where it needs to be. Or some people just say, no, it doesn't matter. We would rather just have a website up. We don't want to pay an additional fee for this integration. Let's just put it up there and we'll deal with it manually. So what we thought was going to kind of be like a hard line is much, much blurrier than we had anticipated. And a lot more people are having some of the integration issues that we encountered. We were able to figure out solutions for Entrada, Run Cafe, and RealPage, and we're still kind of working on some of the other major names in the industry. But what we've found was just speaking to other people who are in similar situations with us, they're all having those struggles or have gone through those struggles.
Yeah, so 9 out of 10 of our clients, more than 9 out of 10 of our clients are on one of those three. So it covers. And on all three of those, we can schedule a tour, get real-time pricing and availability, and handle contact form. I would say, to Chelsea's point, it surprised me when she uncovered that many people launch website and never need the integrations, or they add them months later. That just completely knocked me off my feet. The other thing that surprised me was, and probably a good thing, is like something as simple as like I expected the contact form to have to be integrated with the property management system, and as she's saying, many folks don't need it. They don't expect it because many of the vendors don't provide it, and that I just thought was a must-have. And so it's probably a good thing I didn't know this, because otherwise I feel like one thing that held us up from websites for the longest time, Reed and I hated the idea of websites. One, because people are so picky about them. But two, my other one was like just the integration work. I was like, this is like not worth the effort for us. And if we would have known 2 years ago that integrations weren't like as necessary, I feel like I may have been like, oh, let's do this sooner. And it would have been too soon for us, meaning now we have like more staff. We're in a better place to launch websites and be prepared to handle volume than we ever could have been 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd love to see websites that are fully integrated conversion rates versus those that are not, because it just seems like obvious, right? If you're not showing, the updated inventory, right, floor plans, whatever, that you're going to have a lot of excess, like bad traffic, versus if you keep those up to date. So,
well, that's a good qualifier. Like, do you get more leads because you don't say that you have a 1-bedroom?
I'm sure you do,
right? But they're garbage leads,
right?
And then,
and we know some owners and property managers actually are okay with that,
and they would want it because they might want to try to upsell someone to a 2-bedroom or a 1-bedroom plus a den.
Yeah,
that'd be fascinating, right? If you actually had somebody that had integrations and they were complaining because they weren't getting enough leads, and you're like, you want me to turn off your website integration?
We'll double your leads.
Yeah, right. Have fun with that.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to hit on with this topic is that the schedule a tour integration in particular, this is the most difficult point of integration that we've found, which is understandable because it requires a bilateral kind of feed. You want to pull down from the client's database, okay, what existing appointments are there, and then what availability is there, and then from the website point, once that's submitted, you would need to put those appointments then into the client's database. And so one thing that we did find was that there were a number of people who are fine with basically having a schedule a tour form that doesn't pull from the database and doesn't push to the database either. As long as somebody is able to submit a request for a form, then their team will basically handle it manually from there. So it's almost like a request for an appointment rather than scheduling an actual appointment, which was, again, surprising. But from a consumer perspective, as a user on that website, I know I would certainly certainly prefer to just kind of schedule an appointment, have an event, ICS kind of download where I can just add it to my calendar and then be done, versus have somebody then reach out to me the next day and say, hey, here, you submitted a request for this morning. Obviously it's past the morning. Hey, what other times or days are available for you? Again, just a consumer kind of experience point that I wanted to point out, that we'll kind of see how that affects things also moving forward. So,
and that's where it surprised me, because some of the other, meaning that, just as you said, but that also became, I guess, a benefit, because we got the three major ones handled, but then for those other like clients, the single digit percentile for us that use like Resman or Appfolio or whatever, it's not a requirement now that we have that figured out, because some of those don't even have the API available to be able to schedule an appointment. And I would have thought that means we can't say we're integrated with Appfolio, for example. But instead, those clients already know that. They're like, well, if I want this, I got to use Appfolio's website. Otherwise, I don't have an option. I just got to be okay without it. And many of them are going to be okay without it because they don't want the Appfolio website, just as an example.
Yeah.
Now, I know Appfolio has just launched a new integration program, so that may be changing for them soon, but it's just one example out of, these other dozen management, PMS systems.
So quick question on the tour schedulers. Do those have Tour 24 or Pinwheel like accounted for?
Not
so for the self-guided tours.
Not usually. Usually it's a separate thing. I mean, this is all very specific.
I know it was a year and a half ago. I just didn't know if that changed. It's still a separate widget.
Yeah, there's some integrations that those like Pinwheel and Tour 24 now have. I don't know them off the top of my head, but it's not across the board. Mm-hmm. And so
seems like that should be becoming a bigger, I guess.
Well, I think the challenge for this is that Tour 24, for example, would then need to pay Yardi and RealPage for their integration. And the pricing model may be prohibitive for that to happen. So like we just got notice about our RealPage connection, and for us, we need basically like 4 different RealPage connections versus 1, and the going rate is like $30,000 or something per connection. So it's like, okay, well shoot, now we got to pay $120,000 just to play ball. Mm-hmm. And then they charge per unit now, per month. And so if you're Tour 24, it may not be a viable business model to integrate with these, because like the cost per unit per month just makes it like, okay, this isn't going to work.
Yeah. Well, I'll avoid going down a rabbit hole or rant about all that's wrong with that. But
yeah, it's not just RealPage. It's almost everybody in the industry. So I don't.
No, I get that.
Like
it's
I'm
reality.
picking on them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You're about to add something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so just to kind of piggyback off of that with some data that we pulled for our survey that we sent out to our clients. We had basically asked them for schedule a tour integration. How essential is this to you guys? Would you pay extra for it or would you not? And so of those results, 70% of the people who filled this out said that they would pay extra to have schedule a tour integration. And then 25% had said that it was important, but that they would not pay extra for it. So that's kind of an interesting point to jump off of for if there are issues with some of those platforms that could potentially be solved. Okay, do we then figure out how much it would cost to build that and know that people would be willing to pay for it? It's just kind of a question for the future.
And we'll get into this later when we talk about so what are we going to market with? But just on this exact point, for us at Digible, we always say that there's no like nickel and diming or ancillary fees. So we have to build. So we basically can't charge for it, even though you learn that 70% of people would pay extra for schedule a tour. Just as our own smack recipe, via Jim Collins is we're not going to charge extra for it. So it's just one of those things that means we have to build the program, and that may mean that we have to hit a certain volume to break even now because of it, or so on and so forth. But for those other website people that are listening, you can definitely charge extra if you want.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had one more, I guess, big bucket that I was curious to hear your learnings, which is around content. So it seems like we've been kind of stuck in quicksand as an industry for years and years with content on multifamily websites. I'm curious whether you found that that there's hope, or people are feeling better about content, being able to scale content, or is it kind of the same old thing?
Yeah, I would say This is another one that was a little bit of a mixed bag kind of like design. So there are some people who think, things are functioning fine the way they are. A website with relatively minimal copy, which is kind of, I think, the trend in multifamily, is still fine, or they haven't invested enough in additional copy, additional content to kind of prove that that would be worthwhile. There's also just a really big issue in terms of on the property management team side of things, there typically is not a designated copywriter or a person that can provide that kind of content. And so that falls on the marketing manager. And so we know that from speaking to so many marketing managers, one of the biggest issues there is the turnaround time of, oh, shoot, I want a new website. So now I have to provide all this copy. And so one of the biggest requests that we got from multiple people was having like default kind of placeholder language or offering some kind of level of copywriting services or at least copy editing so that all of the pressure isn't necessarily on them and we can assist them in some way. So we've moved towards a copy editing kind of expectation for our websites, and we're still kind of hashing things out in terms of how we'll provide copywriting services in the future. But I think that the general gist is most people are fine with it as is. There are some people who got really excited by the idea of having, additional content in terms of, oh, is there a dedicated floor plan page? Are there unit-specific light boxes where you can get information on one unit specifically rather than the whole floor plan? There are definitely some of those kind of one-off scenarios, but I would say they were definitely the more rare of the grouping.
Yeah. And I appreciate the answer, but also video. So content at large, but certainly I can understand copywriting was the main thing that kind of came up. But it seems to me like we still see a lot of stock images, not the best photos, and we certainly don't see much video on these websites. And there's a lot of new platforms out there that have hit multifamily that are trying to help, nudge video forward. And I just didn't know how much that came up in your kind of interviews as well.
Well, I think this is a little bit outside of websites, but I think sort of a fun topic. It used to be that people had to go hire their own photographer and videographer to get the website done. Now, the ILSs are trying to provide greater value to the customer.
Yeah, it's baked in.
Yeah, to say like, hey, we'll send someone out to you. But they put limits on how often you can get it done. So it's like it may be every 2 years or every 3 years. And but then there's also a set, like you get these 30 images. That's what you get. Mm-hmm. Like it's not like now we get this extra video thing or this lifestyle shoot or whatever. And so when you think about the industry, when you are a new build, you have the budget that you can wrap into the loan to go get to bring models in and stuff. But after that changes hands, they don't have the budget to now go get a lifestyle video shoot done. So if it didn't happen at first when we launched the property, then we're not going to get it now. Mm-hmm. And so to both of your guys' points, basically the budget is there in year one. If it's not done in year one, it's basically not going to happen unless like their apartments.com contract like is all of a sudden ready to provide them new images, but it's not additional content read beyond what you're used to seeing. Mm-hmm. And so that's the big, I think, challenge. It's when she was interviewing all these clients, they were and I've learned this just after doing more studying on how to build out a product team and such. They're so focused on like, this is what it's like today. And they're not wondering like, man, is there a better way to do this in the future? Or what if I had a page for every available unit and I had unique copy and images for that unit? They don't think that way. So that's where we as a product team need to come forward and move them along if that becomes what our agenda is. But when just talking to clients, they're more like, this is what it is. I don't have time to write more copy. So could you get it done for me for free, basically, right? Mm-hmm. Or whatever, shoot a video for free.
Yep.
Yeah. We did do some competitive intelligence. There was one web vendor who offered those kinds of additional services, which I thought was interesting, but there were a lot of caveats. So for example, if they wanted the videos and the photos that had been taken, then they would have to basically pay an additional fee to kind of have them. And then if they wanted to move off of that website platform. So there are a lot of kind of follow-ups that again would be kind of against what we want to do as a company. And so we're still kind of treating that kind of content creation as something separate and something that we're hoping with some encouragement, clients would be willing to invest in if we make that recommendation, but definitely still a challenge that we're looking at.
But Reed, I mean, I could totally see like obviously like apartment SEO did really well years ago, and it was like there's not a great option for SEO. So it's like, where am I going to go? Apartment SEO. But if you had like apartmentcontent.com, and it was like this is all they did, they could crush it. You know?
Yeah.
Well,
I know this is a hot button for you. So I'm saying there's definitely a need in the marketplace, but it's not what comes first of mind when they're like, I got to launch a website. I was given this property and I have 2 days to get it live.
Yeah, totally. Well, I don't know where we're going next, but I said I covered my buckets, but I had one more.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, you said apartment SEO. So how much did SEO come up? Do people feel good about that, frustrated by it? And I think when you presented last week, you did a good job of saying, these are the requirements we're going to hit, but this isn't all baked in. And I think that's almost counter to what the industry's used to, which is they're being told that all the SEO is already baked in. And so they check that box and move on, and then are set up for kind of a rude awakening. Sometimes a year or two later, it's like, my website's not performing the way I thought it should. And it's like, well, that's because you assumed that baked in SEO was delivering. And in fact, it's not. And so how are we thinking about it? What did you hear as you got into that discussion?
Yeah, there were definitely, it wasn't as big of a topic, I think, externally than it was internally. There were a lot of people internally here at Digible who are wondering, hey, are we bundling services? I'm pitching this. Should I add in websites? Externally, I think there were definitely a couple clients who asked similar questions of, hey, if I'm doing an organic package, do I get a discount on the website? Or same thing with kind of a paid package. But I would say for the most part, clients were happy to see that we would include that kind of baseline SEO optimization. So just to kind of give a little bit of background for the listeners, what we're looking to do is provide baseline SEO optimization. So those are kinds of items that will help tick off boxes in Core Web Vitals scores. So meta descriptions, page titles, schema, alt text, all that kind of stuff. But we aren't going to be fully hashing out full optimization for if your primary goal is to basically rank higher in the search engine result pages. So that's essentially a separate skill set. It's a separate goal. While there is some overlap between websites and SEO in that regard, we would want to basically suggest that the client consider an organic package instead. And I would say that that is mostly in alignment with client expectations. I would say there were only 1 or 2 people that kind of pushed on that or were curious to understand more in terms of, well, if I'm doing this with a website, why do I need a separate package for SEO? But I think for the most part, people were kind of understanding of that, and it made sense why it would be 2 separate services and why we're kind of bundling things.
Yeah, I see both sides of that. Meaning I could argue myself into either position of like, let's not bundle versus bundle. And I think that's hard. And so maybe the best answer is let's just have optionality instead of automatically be bundling, which plenty of providers do. There's certainly some big ones out there that don't. But back to the client experience, Nicole's not on with us right now, but me as a client, do I want to have to buy, 3 more packages to, basically bring my website, to, I guess, a full, like, whatever, optimal status? It's like, well, now I got to get somebody to take care of my offsite, but it connects to my website with social. I got to also do the SEO thing, my reputation, my citations, my integrations, all that stuff, versus I don't want to buy from 5 or 4 different people. I just want it all here. But should that come at a discount? I'm going to take us off track, but I'm just saying, like, that's a big question as far as an experience. Like, I could see a lot of people saying, I don't want to have to buy things separately.
Yeah, I think the big difference there is not, again, back to like putting on my product brain. What I've learned is a lot of people will say something, but if you ask them why and you get to the bottom of it, what they really mean to what you were just saying is they don't want to have to talk to multiple people. So if they can talk to Elisa from Digible and get everything done, they're cool. But they just don't want to talk to 4 different people to get everything done. So then it doesn't need to be bundled, because to your point about optionality, if you do say our websites are $1,000 a month, and it's because it includes video production, content writing, SEO, whatever, they're gonna be like, I can't afford that because my GL says I'm allowed to spend $500. So I can't buy $1,000 a month. But if you break it out, they're like, well, I'm allowed to spend 500 on a website and 500 on SEO. So for them, there's like limitations of like the way they budget and the industry works. But to your point, it's like they only want to have to talk to one person.
Totally.
All right. So is there anything else, Chelsea, before we talk about our offering that you want to talk about, whether it's what you're surprised by, disappointed by, any hot takes you learned or got new opinions from the process?
I think the biggest surprise we had kind of touched on was the integration situation. So we got off on that one. I think that one of the other areas that we're going to have to explore, which kind of leads into Reed's conversation about content, is just what is defined within our website offering, and then what else do we want to add on to it that might cross over into some other realm. So like Reed had said, content might be one of those items, or copywriting, videography, photography, whatever. There's also the system management. So we had gotten feedback that having a DAM system connected to a website would be really valuable. So I think just the biggest hot take was that this is an in-demand service with a lot of connected kind of items that we're going to have to do a lot of discovery on to figure out what exactly does Digible do in the future, and where does that fall within our responsibilities, and what's our end product really going to look like. I'm excited to see how things evolve.
Yeah, I would think one more opportunity that often is overlooked when it comes to websites is analytics, meaning I'll say more specifically analysis of the website analytics. Because you might assume that whoever you're using for paid media, I'll use us included, that you're going to get that. But it's often going to be focused on the campaigns, not on the full analysis. And if you talk to SEO, they're going to tell you about what's happening with the organic metrics, but aren't going to give you the full analysis. And so, one of the most important things I think in websites is how's it doing? Like, and really understanding the data. And it's still, to me, seems like a gap even at Digible, because whenever we talk to our departments, they're usually focused on just their piece instead of the full picture.
And part of that is because from a client handling perspective, nobody wants you to like be bitching about some other vendor, right? Like that's not a good experience. Like we've gotten, our hand slapped before because at some point, I don't care what you say about my website. It's like, it is what it is. So you got to deal with it. Right. So I think, and maybe to your point, Reed, it's there should be expectations from, I'll just say us internally, that our paid media team, organic teams, client services still talk about the website regardless if it's a Digible website or a Rent Cafe website. They just need good client handling skills, so it doesn't seem like we're blaming some other party for our failed thing. But to your point, like we always want our CS person to be like a trusted advisor. And so they should be advising on things that they have control over and things they don't have control over, but they can't make you feel crappy about it. And they can only do it so much.
Right. Yep.
And I like your thing too. Like I know it's on Chelsea's radar because internally reporting was one of those like hot button topics where our client services team was like, so we got to do reporting for websites. And I was like, no, we don't have to do reporting for websites. Like the industry norm is not to get a Ninja Cat report because you bought a Jonah website. That's not what happens. That's it for your paid media vendor, to your point.
Right.
They're just like, well, it's Google Analytics. Like we built the website. Now you're on your own. That doesn't mean that we don't need to now like think about how websites might change our conversation or change reporting when we are reporting on it. And that's something that Chelsea is saying. It's not an SLA that we're providing reporting, but over time, Digible will be diving into the data, running A/B tests, and learning what works better to make our already great websites that much better.
You had some good comments last week in your presentation with David about the ADA. And so if you don't mind, super quick, just hitting on are we where we should be or need to be as an industry related to, Disability Act, as well as, of course, we've been, on the fair housing train for a while. But when it comes to compliance with websites, is the industry in a pretty good spot, or do you think that there's still some real problems there based on what you heard from your interviews?
Yeah, I would say no, the the industry, the multifamily industry specifically, is definitely not where they need to be, but also in general, everyone on the web isn't really where they need to be. So that's not really calling out multifamily. But I would say there's a lack of knowledge in terms of some people just don't really understand or know what ADA compliance even is. So ADA is American Disabilities Act, and ADA compliance on a website involves a lot of different behind the scenes kind of items. So making sure that all of your alt text is super descriptive. So not even just that you have alt text, but also the level of usability of that alt text for screen readers and captions on videos and all kinds of different items that would make a website considered ADA compliant. And one of the issues with ADA compliance is that you can be compliant today, but that doesn't mean that a month from now you still are, because items might break or additional content might be added, and then that content needs to be analyzed. And while there are a lot of crawler tools out there that will give you a kind of baseline option in terms of reporting on your ADA compliance levels, true compliance requires usability testing from somebody who has a disability that's able to actually verify, yes, I was able to use this website without any issues. I got all the information that I needed. And so that can be very, very expensive. So we have had at least one client so far ask for that and be willing to pay the additional money for it, because that is one of the features that we are considering out of scope. It's not impossible, but we'll do that with an added cost. And so we'll kind of see, I think, where we land in terms of numbers and how many clients are actually interested and willing to pay those kinds of costs for this additional feature on their website. How important is it to them? Because I'd say for right now, those are the minority, I would say.
To be
No pun intended.
To be transparent, when we did our research on this as a company, roughly the stats I saw were something like 30 to 40% of people are technically fall under ADA on the internet. And most of that is frankly because of you have to wear glasses. Like, for example, I'm looking at Chelsea. And so a website is supposed to be accessible if Chelsea forgets her glasses. And that means like if you need to blow up the screen to, I think the standard is 300%, the website can't break because you magnified the screen to 300%. And most websites do break at that point. Yeah. The way I also think about it, to your comment on alt text, is think of it like a police sketch, but somebody that can't see any images or colors on the website should be able to basically make a police sketch of the website based on the alt text that is there in the source code. So when you think of that level of detail, most folks listening be like, oh, there's no way that you could do a police sketch and get my website 70% accurate off of just the alt text. And then to her point on widgets versus humans, the going rate for a human to make a website ADA compliant is about $1,000 a page. So you're looking at like a $6,000 charge for an apartment website, and that's definitely not in budget for most apartments. And the widgets work sorta, but they cover like somewhere between 50 and 60%. So there's still like a 40% gap in best case scenario of what they don't cover. As far as like ADA at large for the industry and the internet, I would say this industry is like Chelsea was saying, we're not necessarily that much further behind than others, but it is going to be it's going to be very hard for us because of the small budgets to get things where they should be and what the law says it should be. Now, who does the onus fall on for this? We are saying it doesn't fall on us to be ADA compliant. That's on you, owner, to get that done. Now we will launch similar to SEO, like we're going to launch with a certain score. So Chelsea will get to this, but Core Web Vitals, that's what we're going to use. Is we're going to launch with a certain score, let's say 80, that we won't start below. When most companies in this space are launching with a Core Web Vitals score around 26, 27. So we're like looking to be like 3 times the industry standard as far as our performance. But we can't take you to 100, or we're not going to launch with 100. That's where you now need to pay someone like an SEO expert to get the rest of the way to write copy and do that kind of stuff. Same thing with ADA. Like we will launch with a certain, SLA regarding ADA, but we can't give you the, isn't it like a AAA stamp or something, Chelsea? Do you remember? There's like a scale that they use. I think it's like AAA, but we can't certify you there. It's just not going to fit in our cost model, and it can't, back to the $6,000 at this point, right? Now that might be something 2 years from now where Digible's like, hey, now we see a way to scale this where we can launch with the AAA, just not today. So anyways, just wanted to give some color there on ADA specifically.
Yeah, it's great context. We've talked enough about fair housing probably, and I don't mean for good, but we'll move past that one and hear a little bit more about our offering, I guess, and if you want to highlight some things out of all of this that have shifted that you may have introduced or actually like decided to put on the bench from where we started, I guess 9 months ago.
Yeah. For sure. David, do you have anything else to add before we jump into that?
No, I'm good to talk about our stuff. And then there's certain things like splash pages that'll come up through that as far as like what we've discovered.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, so Digible is offering a flat rate monthly fee, basically for almost like a subscription service for websites. So no one-time fees or startup costs, switch costs.
Yeah.
Thanks. Get the people excited.
Finance your website now. Digible.
Yeah. So one of the biggest takeaways from our interviews and from our external survey that we sent out was that we learned that most people really, really hate the switch costs, the startup fees to kind of start a website project. So they'll be paying anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000 just to get the project up and running. And then after that, they'll still be expected to pay anywhere from $100 to $300 a month for the regular kind of upkeep and hosting and all that kind of stuff.
And then other add-ons that may take it to $700.
Exactly. So those hidden fees and add-ons can really add up very quickly. So some people might have a deal with a web vendor where they get a discounted rate, and maybe they're doing a premium package, so they don't have the individual add-ons. They just have that flat rate. But a lot of other people have a lot of hidden costs that add up very quickly that get that number much higher on a per month basis. And most people do not want to deal with that. So 65% of the people who filled out our survey said that they would prefer monthly payments over one-time or annual payments. And so that's what we're kind of basically moving toward with our pricing model. Is we only want to do monthly. We're going to start charging that when we start working on the project, not when the project goes live, because we know there can be a lot of delays in that process. So we're hoping that the fact that they'll be billed right away means that we'll have some of that level of responsiveness. So that's, I would say, the biggest differentiator, just kind of, from a ticketing perspective, or not a ticketing. I was thinking of like a price label kind of perspective. Cost model. There you go. So it definitely sets us apart in that regard. And that monthly maintenance includes items that a lot of our competitors don't offer in terms of, we'll make sure that your website is up to date from a technical perspective to make sure that, you don't get hacked. There aren't bots trying to fill out your form, all of that kind of stuff. We were kind of surprised with the blurry lines in this realm, and also the lack of this service offered by some other people. There are some other competitors that also don't offer just kind of a monthly maintenance package where if you have edits on your website, where can I send those? Are those covered within our monthly costs? And that was often the answer to that question was often no, it's not covered. We're going to charge you hourly for every single request you send it on a monthly basis. So that's also something we're kind of basically solving for with our solution, is that $500 a month cost not only covers the build of the entire website, but then also the long-term maintenance from a security perspective, a technical perspective, but then also the content on the website. If you need some things updated here or there, you can reach out to Digible and we'll do that for you as part of your monthly package.
Yeah, I would say when you look at the market, Chelsea put together a terrific just vendor matrix with like what's included, what's not included. And there was a clear gap. There was basically, you can get this quote free option if you're buying like one of the PMS systems or CRMs. Then you could pay, as she was saying, like somewhere $5 to $10,000, let's just say, for a productized style website. And then you can pay for a custom website that's like $15 to $30,000. then any of those that aren't the PMS one are charging you somewhere for like what we thought would be required, like integration work or whatever. They're going to charge you somewhere between $300 and $700 a month. Like if you want your Instagram feed on your website, that's an extra charge. If you want your schedule tour, that's an extra charge. If you want a concession banner pop up, that's an extra charge. So the gap in the market here is, as we mentioned, people can afford a custom website if it's year one of a property, but once they sell the property, they may not get to keep that website or that brand, and therefore they need a new one. So any property that's 2 or 3 years old now doesn't have much budget because someone wants the max NOI, and so they are stuck basically with like one of the PMS websites, which is locked down, not brand compliant, and yada yada. Or they can go to somebody like a Jonah and get it done, but they still have to now convince the owner to be like, hey, I know you didn't plan to, but you got to spend 10 grand to get this website built plus like $600 a month. So the gap here for us is to provide an option that's basically meets the needs of, let's say, 80% of the market. That is super flexible and brand compliant, that can integrate with any of the major players, including Schedule a Tour, for example, and not lock you into a long-term agreement. And get the thing live in a matter of days versus a matter of months.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love it.
Yeah. The other thing I would say to piggyback off of what David just kind of set up for us there is one of the other differentiating factors that we made sure to focus on during our discovery and then during the creation of what exactly our product was going to look like is the usability, the user experience for the client. So one of the other issues is that sometimes a client might reach out to a web vendor and say, hey, I want to be able to update A, B, and C on the website, but I don't have access. Can you set me up with a username? And the answer to that would either be no or sure, but that will charge, we're now going to be charging you for an hour's worth of work for something that definitely doesn't take an hour. And that's $150 just to get a username set up. So obviously super frustrating experience. And then sometimes when a client would get in, they wouldn't even know how or where to make any updates because it was a confusing interface. So we're solving for that by allowing all of our clients to have access. We'll kind of ask that question at the very beginning of who on your team needs access. What are their email addresses? We'll make sure that's set up for them from the get-go. And then when they get into the system, it's a super simple visual editor. You don't need to be a developer to make any changes. It's going to be super simple and clear from a UI perspective, and hopefully be able to solve for a lot of those kinds of hiccups and roadblocks along the way. And then, hitting on flexibility again. So you have that flexibility option. If you want to make the updates yourself, you can, or you can send it to the Digible team and we'll take care of it for you. So really hoping to make the client experience better holistically with all of these kinds of differentiating factors.
Yeah. Well, this reminds me a little of client logins for like their dashboards from like 15 years ago, is that everybody said, I can't see it. I want to see it. I want to see it. And then you give them logins and they never log in. So I don't know how this is going to go, because I think it's great that, clearly we listened and this is, we're trying to solve this problem, but the behavior is something I'll be really interested to see. And how much do our account managers or yourself try to coach them and empower them? Because even though it may seem simple, you're still going to get a lot of people being like, I don't know what to do, and are we really going to try to redirect some of those changes to our clients, or are we just going to say, you know what, we'll take care of it? So those are things that, as we get further into it, will be really interesting to see how we manage.
I think it's
what the behavior is.
Yeah, I think it's like anything. Like I'll look at organic social with us. Like if we're writing your social posts, when you go to review the content, you can add a comment to like fix it. Like, hey, I don't like the way this sounds. Please change the word to this. Of course, they can also email their AM, right? And I view it the same way here. It's like, hey, the concession is done. Please take it down. And now, like AM probably or Chelsea can do it, right? But also at some point, the client's going to learn, like, even though like our average account manager responds in less than 4 hours, it's like, well, I could just it's the same amount of time to go do this versus like, email someone. And I think one of the big things there is Chelsea has also helped build out a multi-site access. So unless you were on like a Rent Cafe, RealPage, or Entrata before, the other providers in the space basically have one login per website. So you would have If you have 50 websites you're looking at, you have 50 logins to get this done, which is so annoying if you're the customer trying to manage it. If you're somebody otherwise, like on Rent Cafe, for example, you can now quickly get to any of your 50 websites and make the changes quickly. But it was surprising to me that did not exist outside of the property management systems. It's also obviously not real world for third-party managers to have all of their properties on Rent Cafe or on RealPage. So this to me goes into, as you've often used the term, Reed, universal adapter, but we want our websites to be a universal adapter. No matter your tech stack, you should be able to bring it with you, but then have a best-in-class website, with best-in-class performance.
Yep. Well, one more question on this element of usability and who's using it is property manager versus marketing manager. So David just kind of shared, that use case of the marketing manager of having to go into 50 different websites to update like 50 different logins. But is it more typical for the property manager to be making these changes and have the authority to do that versus the marketing manager? So this gets a little bit into just our own scenario right here. I don't mind airing this out around collateral, where it's like our account managers are the ones that passing collateral to our clients all the time. And so we want them to feel like they have some autonomy or authority over that. But at the same time, we brought in a marketing director so that it doesn't, look like Frankenstein out there with our collateral. So she's there to make sure, hey, let's have some standards, creative guidelines, whatever. So I just, if you guys want to comment on that. Are we expecting with this usability to be more the property manager taking advantage of that or the marketing manager?
It really depends, and Chelsea can jump in after if she has something different, but it really depends on that management company and their workflow. Like as we've seen, which is funny because we're going through the EOS accountability chart refresh right now, how it seems like we just know who handles what. When you really get down into it, it's not clear. That's my experience with property management companies. Like, who really owns updating the concession on the website? In many of our cases, it's actually the marketer that ends up handling it. But if you ask them, like, should the property manager be able to do this? They say, yeah, well, but they never do it. Right. So it's just not clear who owns it. And then the marketer is like, well, but if it's still on the website, who's going to get, reamed on this one? It's like, it's going to be, they get yelled at before the property manager, even though it's their, quote, responsibility. So what I love about this, though, is that the platform that Chelsea has helped to build out can lock down the permission levels based on the user. So if we wanted for example, if a client wanted the property manager to only have access to the concessions, they could do that and then not get access to anything else to mess with the copy, for example. And that's also, again, a big differentiator, which you could speak to, Chelsea, but many of these other providers it's all or nothing. Like you get full access to what we allow people to edit, or you get no access. Or you basically, like if it's a custom website provider, it's like, good luck editing PHP.
Yeah. Or there have been some cases where you might have full access, but full access in that web vendor's platform is completely different than others. So full access doesn't include schema or, the header PHP where you would add any like scripts or tracking codes or anything like that. So that full level access really isn't full level, and you still have to go through the process of submitting a request for something and then, waiting for however long it takes for it to get applied. But I don't have anything to add in terms of the property manager versus marketing manager. I would say I, for the most part, heard from marketing managers, and it was a similar situation to what David described. It just kind of depends on the PMC.
Cool. All right. Well, you got another one for us, right? No, we have kind of three main, I'll say, differentiators.
So
you covered usability, and you covered the, what was the first one? Good Lord.
What, like the pricing and
the cost model.
Yeah. And so the other one we have kind of touched on briefly, but haven't explicitly stated, which is the flexibility. So, us doing something for you, or you doing it yourself because you have the access, but also design flexibility. So what we were hitting on earlier with a lot of locked down templates and the restrictiveness of that experience. Basically, we're creating where we have created what we're calling a Mr. Potato Head approach. So we have some templates that are already pre-built. We're calling them flexible templates because they're flexible. We can rearrange things and adjust based on that client's brand and expectations and vision. But we we also have the option, as I mentioned earlier, of creating something that seems a little bit more custom. So we're kind of calling that semi-custom. And, from there, we'll have something that we create for a client that we'll then send to them to review through a prototype stage where they'll be able to see 2 pages, how that's reflected, and, be able to have the opportunity to make any adjustments before we build the rest of the website out. So we have that flexibility in terms of your experience going through building a website with Digible, and then also the flexibility of your options for design while building, and then also flexibility afterwards for management.
Yeah, I'll stick on Chelsea's potato head comment because
I was hoping you would, and I hope you'll claim it.
I'll take ownership of this in case anybody doesn't like it. They don't blame Chelsea for
You're
it.
like Bud from Pleasantville. It's like either David was reincarnated from a 1950s like dad, or something else is going on.
Yeah.
But potato head is just one more example.
Yeah. Well, the point of this is to describe, I know, when Scott and I from Jonah have talked a lot, and he says, hey, people don't need custom websites. And I think Scott's analogy is like television, it's still a square box, and you got to produce a 30-minute show or something to that nature. I'm calling potato head because as Chelsea was saying, is semi-custom, meaning these are clearly not going to be custom websites. If you want a custom website that does Flash animation or whatever, HTML5 these days, then you go to a custom shop. What this is just like potato head. Like, we start with a potato and then you can swap out for glasses or a mustache. I don't think he has a beard. I think it's just a mustache.
Yeah, it's just a mustache.
Yeah. So you can swap some things out, but really, because of the amount of variations we have from each of the elements, it can basically be the equivalent of a custom website. In fact, Chelsea has already taken several websites that were fully custom builds and migrated them into our platform, and they look pixel for pixel, basically the same thing. So I don't want to give people the wrong impression. The goal of this is to have a high performing website, and Chelsea, as running this product, is going to be pushing people on best practices. And so when they're like, oh, I want it to have a 60-second video before you can click on something, she's going to say, not going to happen. Right. Because we don't want our name attached to a website that underperforms just because someone, I don't know, wants to go Chris Angel on this thing or something. I was going to say David Blaine, but I didn't want to pick on him, so I went Chris Angel.
I was just thinking Chelsea's job is to make sure that somebody doesn't put the mustache on the potato's butt.
Yeah. I like that one. Yeah, there you go. So I'm super excited about our product, but I definitely think the biggest challenge is going to be, how do we continue to communicate with clients to set expectations? So as she said, we have one limiter in here that we hope helps with it, meaning like you sign up in month 1, we start charging you month 1 as we start building the website, so that it's kind of your point earlier, Reed, like our websites out of the gate are going to outperform any of the other industry standards. So get it live, and then over time we can tweak what you want. I think that's one of the other differentiators that I don't think you hit explicitly, Chelsea, but these lead times of anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months, that's not where you're at for launching websites.
Yeah, our turnaround time, if all deadlines are met and expectations are followed, is about 3 weeks, and even less in a best case scenario. If they want to go with one of our template options, they have super minimal revisions. Also, if they want to, if what we were hitting on earlier, if they don't really care about the integration being fully hashed out, if there are any delays there, I mean, honestly, we could probably launch a website in like 9 days. But that's, best case scenario kind of a situation.
I think
9 days, ladies and gentlemen. 9 days.
I actually want to. Chelsea is super, I'll say, resistant. She's probably going to hate that I do this, but she knows I was going to do it anyways. For one, we're trying to kill the word template from our vocabulary. So I feel like if this was a drinking game, Reed would be blasted right now. Chelsea, can you said template a bunch of times? The main thing is because template is kind of, to me, has a bad connotation to it, because people are used to Rent Cafe or Real Page. I'm stuck with this thing. So I think we're going to try to use the word flexible layout. So it's like we have these layouts that are already done, where it's like, these are the sections that we recommend in what order, for example. Now we can change it to match your brand guidelines. So with that caveat, to her point, if you want to choose one of the layouts we have off the shelf, then it can be done in as little as 9 days if you have all the assets and yada, yada. And in fact, it could probably be done faster, but she's building an extra time right now just because we're not putting a limit on at this moment on like, okay, we're only going to do 10 websites a week, for example. So over time, you'll see that timeline compress. We have a goal by the end of the year to have to be able to launch a website in 5 days. In some cases now she could do that if someone provided her everything they needed on day one. She just doesn't want to commit to 5 days right now until we've done it a few hundred times. The other thing I wanted to point out is what she mentioned about integrations. What really delays a lot of websites is the integration work. So when you think about it, what we found is a lot of people in this industry will launch a Entrata or Rent Cafe like templated site just to have it up before they can get the main site live, meaning like what they're going to, I'm going to say their real website live, but then that real website goes live without having integration work done. And then it gets done like a month later. So in reality, we're building in a lot of concessions here for integration work because the provider may be slow or whatever the other integrations team, but it's not a limitation of us. It's more of a communication gap issue. So we're hoping we can solve for that, where we can get clients in the habit of like, all right, CC us on the email on day one. That way on day one, we can start working on integration, which then means we can have it done in 2 weeks and not the whole website with integration done, as opposed to let's build the website and then start working on integrations. And now it takes a month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So we basically have tried to offset a lot of these issues that we've discussed with communications and getting assets and information that we need in order to launch the website by putting all of that information in one location in a form that has automatic communications associated with it. So it'll essentially automatically kind of walk the client through the process of giving us all of the information that we need in order to successfully complete a website project. And they're assigned that essentially right when we are starting the project. And so the goal would obviously be they submit that, we have all the information we need, we run off to the races with all of those kinds of items, like David said, starting on integration as quickly as possible, because we know that can be a little bit of a roadblock.
Well, you have something else, Reed?
I do, but go ahead.
I was going to move more towards like final comments here. I know we're over an hour in. So if anyone that's not Chelsea's dad is still listening, then they can go ahead and email us and let us know I still listen to the whole thing. Otherwise, hello, Chelsea's dad.
My mom still listens to every episode.
Does she really?
No.
Oh.
I was going to say,
how did she not get a shout out
I don't
yet?
know if she's even heard a episode. But for Chelsea's dad, my wrapping up question is, these 3 main differentiators, are we surprised that they, I'll say, still exist, meaning the opportunity to bring this to market? So is there a conflict of interest in any way, do you think, with the 3 kind of spots we're picking? Because we're doing more than that, but you really called out the cost model, the usability, and the flexibility. And it seems to me like, home run. These are great differentiators. So why then are they still available for us to bring to market as a differentiator?
That's a good question. I think I can hit on flexibility because I think that there's a lot of concern over scope with offering the level of flexibility that we are offering. And I do think that in certain situations, we're going to have to kind of outline, okay, we got this kind of one-off request. But in most cases, we don't get those one-off requests. The changes that are requested are minimal, but we may need to figure out how to handle that 1% situation, but we're not going to focus too much on that. We're focusing on the majority, which is that they won't have outlandish requests, minor requests of moving the arrangement or changing background images or whatever. We can obviously handle that. So I think that's the biggest area with flexibility, is if things aren't exactly the same for every single project, if we offer this level of customizations, it will blow out of proportion, and that would be problematic from a business perspective. In terms of the cost model, I think, David, I would kind of ping pong this over to you, because I feel like when I came on board, you already had this idea, and then we did a lot of research that just kind of reinforced it. Why do you think our pricing model is basically like, why are we able to move forward with that and no other competitors offering that model? Like, why do you think that still exists?
Well, thank you. Reed, I actually view this very similar to when we were first starting Digible and what you were pitching all of our business advisors. Like, nobody has built their business around being able to offer this cost model. And the industry has allowed them to accept like what what's already there. And so I do think Jonah has best product market fit in the industry today as far as like what works for most people and is a pretty bang up product. I think they do a killer job, and they're going to continue to be a great option for many people, even with our product. But Chelsea does not know this yet. But I know of other spaces, and I'll mention one in particular, counselors and therapists. There is a company there that offers websites at $80 a month, no startup fees. It's $80 a month. And they've been able to scale to over 5,000 websites. And it's because like in that industry was very similar to ours, where it was like, okay, everyone's on the same CRM system for counselors, and they're stuck with the CRM free website that comes with it, but it sucks. And so they want some other website. But if you're a therapist, you don't have a $5,000 budget to build a website. That hurts. So they came into the market, they offered websites at $80 a month, and they scaled to 5,000 websites in just a matter of years. And now that's like the norm. That's like what's expected in that industry. I think the same thing is here. So just to reiterate, I think part of it is no one has built their business around being able to offer a $500 website. And they're not willing to, basically, it's the innovator's dilemma. They're not willing to like cut rate before someone forces them to cut rate. And the market hasn't forced them to cut rate.
One more question on that, and then you guys can, if you don't mind, wrap up with the usability on why that still is available, I guess, as a differentiator. But why not your GoDaddy? Like, why haven't those offerings taken root in this industry? And I'm not trying to be dense. I already have an assumption on how you guys are going to answer that. But when we talk about 500 is such a cost-friendly like entry point, and then you mentioned there's in therapy and counseling $80 a month. I mean, you can race to the bottom and just be like, well, if I just, go through GoDaddy, I can get a website up and running for 20 or 40 bucks, whatever it is. So why hasn't the industry grabbed onto that more, or have they? And it's just not our clientele as far as expectations. So seeding a little bit, leading, but just want to hear from you guys. Why isn't the DIY or DIY?
Yeah.
Yeah. DIY model, I'm using that loosely, like taking root in multifamily.
I think the biggest issue is what we've hit on a few times, which is integrations. Handling that component is still something that can be very confusing starting out, and also just I think there's a lack of desire for people to want to set up their own websites. So like the majority of the clients that we spoke to either were forced to do that out of complete necessity because of a situation like what David outlined, where there was a transfer of ownership or whatever there was, and now all of a sudden something needs to get on the internet as soon as possible. And so then the marketing manager feels obligated to do that. But I don't think that there was any property manager or marketing manager that I spoke to that wanted to just go and find their own solution and build it themselves. David, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, I do think some of your answer with your lead was right, Reed, where it's not our clientele. Our clientele tends to want like fancier, nicer looking websites. The clientele that doesn't want that needs something serviceable. And it's like they're competing with, like, I'll just say, like, whether it's their old Resman website or Himlane or Appfolio or whoever, pick any of the folks that are more on the far tail end of like property management companies. It's like they've got Craigslist to get their customers, and then like their website, maybe an apartments.com listing or something. So it's like they don't need something that much better. I think one reason is also because housing has been so tight over the last decade that it's like you don't have to be that good, to basically for a website to be good enough to get the leads. But oh shoot, I was firing on all cylinders until just the second. There's one other point I wanted to make on the integration work. It's been on the user to build the website. When you talk about like a Squarespace or a Wix or a GoDaddy, they are like, hey, here's a WYSIWYG editor, good luck. And then from the property management companies, they don't have great widgets that allow you to integrate with those things like an iframe or whatever. I would say, and this is, I guess, might qualify as her hot take, it's a missed opportunity from the property management systems to not offer, like, they could charge $20 a month to be like,
what I was going to say.
Yeah, I'll try. But also they could follow the Salesforce, the Salesforce model, where Salesforce doesn't want to like custom build your Salesforce instance for you. They recommend you to a consultant that will do it. a very missed opportunity for like a rent cafe to open up their website product and say, hey, we have these 100, preferred vendors that can use our software and make it work for you. Instead, Rent Cafe is like, oh, we'll build you your own property management template, but it's $20,000 or whatever it is. I mean, it depends on what you want done. So I would just say, if I'm a property management company, there's real, appetite in the market if you offered, whether it's these like these consultants that would be able to build on your platform, and you charge a consultant like an annual fee of whatever, $5,000 just to be on that list, or to offer these like, here's something that plugs into Squarespace or whatever. The big challenge with the Squarespace thing is when you like a marketing manager doesn't have the time really to build it, so it's like that's a problem. Like, it's just probably not going to get done well if they get it done. And if you're an owner, I mean, you and I have tried to build Squarespace websites, Reed, and as technical as we are, we don't really have the patience to do a great job with it. And so it's going to end up shooting out the back end of like, it's not a great option anyways. Therefore, I think I would go with like, here's a list of consultants that you can contact. Good luck.
Mm-hmm. As technical as you are.
You're pretty technical. You know JavaScript. I don't. Let's take that.
That's my claim to fame. That'll be on my tombstone.
Yeah.
Learn JavaScript.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this was awesome, Chelsea. Thank you, as always. So thorough. Love all the context, updates, strategy, thinking. I'm truly pumped about websites with Digible. I think we're bringing a great product to the market, and hope it's a wild success.
Absolutely. Same. Thanks for having me. If anybody is interested in knowing more about our newest website offering, you can go to digible.com/websites, and you can sign up for a demo and kind of walk through things with myself or David.
And if you made it this far into the episode, since this is the longest one we've done in a while, probably coming at 90 minutes total after our intro, you can email me, David at Digible, with the subject free lunch, including Chelsea's dad, and I'll send you a free lunch. So, come claim your lunch, Chelsea's dad. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Hope you enjoyed.